Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on talkTV. Terry in Ramsbottom says, UK passport control in Calais. They've got a dozen desks, but I've never seen more than 3 open. Well, I think that is generally the case. You know, once again, you have to find yourself asking the question, did you not know it was going to be the first Saturday of the Easter holidays? Did you not know that there would be a lot of people travelling? Did you not expect maybe to put a few more people on to make sure that people could actually get onto a ferry without having to wait 15 bleeding hours? Lisa Minot's here from the Sun. Very good morning to you, Lisa.
Morning.
Not a great weekend to be trying to get across the channel, but of course you can come the other way, no problem at all. Just get on a little boat, and nobody will even ask. You won't even be asked for your identification at the other side. So that's kind of ironic, but we'll leave that to one side. What's it all about? What's going wrong?
Well, I mean, I think, again, it's another one of these perfect storms, but how many more of these storms do we have to endure? Yes, there was some issues with bad weather on Friday, but why that would mean that it's taken until Monday morning before they've managed to process all of these coaches, that doesn't make sense. They said they started their planning 4 months ago to make sure that this big getaway...
And this is the Port of Dover we're talking about?
Yes.
Right.
They always said that, you know, they've 4 months planning to make sure that this big getaway was going to be smooth and not problem-free. That's not what happened. They then blame the fact that 15% more coaches were booked onto ferries than they thought. Well, again, I mean, you don't just randomly decide to take a coach to Dover. These are trips, as we've seen, a lot of them were school trips with families sending away their kids on ski breaks or sports breaks. And these people, you know, they've obviously had at least a year's notice. I'm a mum myself. I know, you know, these trips cost a fortune.
They do. And if you're booking a coach onto a ferry, I presume that you can only book it onto the ferry if there's room on the ferry, and when that ferry's full, you have to book it on a different ferry. So it's not as if they didn't know they were coming, because you don't just turn up at Dover without a reservation, do you? So, I mean, that is where I think the main problem has been. And then we do have to admit the fact that, you know, it is taking longer to get people through. Since we decided to vote to leave the European Union, we are now regarded as a third country, a third-party country. So that does mean that we have to have these enhanced checks now. Now, every time you used to, pre-Brexit, you know, you would just wave your passport as you drove past, and there would be a very cursory look at it. It's now taking about a minute per car. That's if you've got 4 people in it. A coach can take anything to 20 to 30 minutes. Now, if you've got lots of coaches, there were 300 on Saturday alone, all turning up. If you haven't staffed up properly for that, or actually have the right space for those coaches, and I think that was half the problem as well, they just didn't know where to put the coaches. Once there was a bit of a delay, they had nowhere to put them, hence why they were all sent off to this is why when we talk about,
stations.
you know, these lorries backing up on the M20, which happens on a regular basis, they just don't have enough space down there.
No.
You know, so why don't they do something about that? It's a bit like the NHS, you know, why don't you fix it rather than just complaining about it every time it happens?
Well, I mean, that's it. And it is a constrained space. There isn't anywhere else to go with Dover Port. They've gone as far as they can. Last year they
could
introduced...
knock most of Dover down and nobody would care, because it's one of the most ugly towns I've ever seen, and then just make it a massive coach park.
Just tunnel into the cliffs, basically.
Just make it a massive coach park. But again, it's this lack of planning. And I accept that the French have decided that they want to now look at everybody's passport. But I flew to Italy, as I'm sure you fly to Spain and all sorts of other places, last summer, and they were checking everybody's passport. It didn't take any longer than it did the last time I went there, when they didn't have those rules in place. So, you know, if they're looking at your passport and now they're stamping it, it might be taking a little bit of time. But it's more the volume of numbers, isn't it, that's the problem? That's
right. And again, we can't have the Port of Dover and other places saying, oh, but it's, you know, a really big holiday, there's lots of people travelling.
Well, they're all blaming Brexit, aren't they, down there as well? Which is a bit, I would say, disingenuous. As you say, it's part of the problem. That it's taking slightly longer. But if you know that, it's not like a surprise, is it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and there has been other proposals put forward in terms of maybe expanding the port facilities at somewhere like Ramsgate, so that we're not having everybody all trying to go through this one particular part. I mean, obviously, it's the quickest way to get across the channel. That's why people use it. But I think what might happen is that, as we heard over the weekend, people saying, that's it, I'm not doing Dover again, I'm going to fly, or I'm going to go from somewhere else. Well, that then just moves the problem. If they start going to different ports that also maybe aren't set up for it, we need to look at it and see exactly what we do. And actually, what worries me more is the fact that once we have the entry-exit system, the EU's entry-exit system, which is coming in apparently in November, well, this is going to be a new series of biometric checks. So you will have to have, every single person will have to have once every 2 years or 3 years, I haven't quite said what yet, they'll have to have their fingerprints taken, and they'll have to have facial recognition. Now, if you've got a car at the moment where it's taking a minute for 4 people to have their passports checked, they're staying in their car while that's happening.
Yeah.
Imagine what's going to happen when everybody has to get out of that car and go and have their fingerprints taken and the biometric checks.
So like what you do when you go into America,
exactly.
effectively.
Yeah, but that's set up. An airport is set up for that kind of sort of, process.
Right.
A port isn't. You can't have people wandering around car lanes as cars are going back and forth. And, the Port of Dover has been quite rightly saying for, quite a while now, look, what is going to happen? Now, there's obviously issues with this system. It was meant to be introduced last November. The EU have delayed it till May this year and then again to November this year.
Right.
And it's going to be linked with the new visa, the sort of ESTA for Europe, which is going to cost around €7.
Right.
Again, will last for 2 years. And at the moment, I don't think those two systems can even talk to each other.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's something that we've got to come up with in terms of somewhere like Dover. There just physically isn't the space to actually try to get all of these people out of cars and coaches and get them all through this new system.
Maybe they should invent the hovercraft. Oh, no, they already did, and then they stopped using it.
I know.
That was one of the
fabulous.
greatest ways to get across the channel of all time. Why did they stop it?
I think it just wasn't financially viable anymore.
Because you could put cars on it as well. It was a big thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, but you could get more people on a ferry. That's the problem.
Yeah, you can, but I mean, it's just absolutely. It must have been awful to be sitting on a coach with a load of school children.
Can you imagine? Yes, I wouldn't have wanted to have been teacher this weekend on a coach for 18 hours, up to 18 hours. Some of those kids were on coaches.
What are the other problems we've got to look forward to over Easter? Because people will be flying. I mean, I think there is an air traffic controller strike in France at various points, isn't there?
So we've got air traffic control.
That's great, Europe, isn't it? I mean, they're so helpful. Let's just go on strike. Let's just make them do all this. I mean, really ridiculous.
I mean, the air traffic control in France is a big issue because this doesn't just impact people who are flying into France. This applies to any airline that flies over French airspace. So if you're taking a flight to the likes of Spain or Italy or somewhere like that, you're still going to be impacted by this. Now, they've got rules in France that say that they have to have a minimum level of national flights within their own borders.
Right.
So those are prioritised. And then other flights are just told, well, you cannot go over our airspace. Last week, I think it was the week before last, Ryanair had to cancel 200 flights in a day because of the air traffic control strikes in France. So that is one issue that's going to be coming up. We've also got strikes at Heathrow at Terminal 5 that's impacting the British Airways flights.
Yeah.
They've been told by Heathrow to cancel 5% of their flights to try to make sure that things continue to run smoothly. Now, hopefully that will just remain as that. But what we saw on Friday was actually 72 flights were cancelled. So there is still, a significant risk of impact.
If you're on one of those flights and they cancel it, there's a time factor, isn't there? They have to cancel it within a certain period in order for you to be able to get a refund or get on another flight or something like that?
They can cancel it at any time, but what you do have to do is, the airline has to do, is make sure that they get you to your destination as quickly as possible.
As close to the actual flight.
As close to that flight as possible, either with one of their flights or with the rival airline. Or you can have, as you say, a refund, and that would come through. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes a while to come through.
Because we had a lot of this, didn't we, last year when sort of the travel business got back up and running again, and it was a bit behind the sort of the curve. But you'd think this year they'd have got their act together, wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, I think we are much better staffed up this year. We haven't seen the kind of scenes that we saw last year. There's just been just as much of a big getaway, not just at Dover, but at airports, and we have seen it going pretty smoothly. That's if you can actually get away, because, of course, today we see the first of 5 weeks of strikes by the Passport Office.
By the Passport Office, yeah.
Who, again...
Unbelievable. What's going on?
They're just conspiring against us. We're never going to be able to...
It doesn't seem like that. I mean, it is incredible, isn't it, that nothing seems to work properly in the way that it used to. Whereas now, I mean, I kind of dread going anywhere now because you just think, well, what could go wrong? Well, pretty much everything.
Yep, exactly.
And you never used to have to think like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and visit my mother again in the States, going away next weekend to France, funnily enough, so hopefully that'll be all right. But, you just you can't take anything for granted anymore.
No, and it is a lot about basically making sure you tick as many boxes as you can to try to, sort of avoid these sort of issues. One thing with the Passport Office strikes, I'm not sure how much impact that's going to have. It's about 1 million passports that normally would have been issued in that sort of 5-week period.
Yes.
But it's only about a quarter of the staff that have gone on strike. And I think what's probably going to be impacted more than anything else is that it will be those people needing passports at the very last minute.
Yes.
Because those are the ones that take the time.
So if you're waiting for one, like because you want to travel sort of next month or next week or something, then you're probably...
10 weeks. At the moment, you've got to leave yourself 10 weeks. But they were, before the strike, they were being processed in about 2.5 weeks, but you now have to leave, I would say, those 10 weeks.
I just got on you a little while ago, so I'm going to sit here and look a bit smug. But bad luck if you're not in that situation. Great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Lisa Minot there from The Sun on the dreadful weekend that people had down in Dover. And it ain't going to get any better unless they improve the facilities, quite frankly.